Welcome to the second installment of Talk with the Moderator. My name is Amanda Currie, and I was the moderator of the 2019 General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church in Canada. Today, I'm talking with the Reverend Paulette Brown. Paulette is the minister at St. Andrew's Church in Humber Heights in Toronto, and she was actually a nominee as moderator of the 2020 General Assembly, which unfortunately was canceled. So we wait and we see who will be the nominees for 2021. But I'm very happy to have this opportunity to talk with Reverend Paulette. I remember her fondly from many years ago at the beginning of my ministry because she was one of the guidance counselors who I had in my guidance conference as I was just preparing and discerning my own call to ministry, a very important moment in my life in ministry and my call. But Paulette was born and baptized and raised in Jamaica. She emigrated to Canada in 1983 together with her 3 children and her husband. And she served at University Church in Toronto for 8 years. And then after that moved to St. Andrew's Church in Humber Heights. A couple of things that stand out in her biography to me was she developed the Created for Life youth ministry in response to violence and premature deaths among Black youth in the community. And later she developed a mission to newcomer families for the Presbytery of East Toronto. Paulette has a passion for preaching and reading scriptures with new eyes. She has tasted firsthand the pain and sufferings generated by the church's failure to do justice, yet she possesses a spirit that refuses to give up on God. And I hope that in our conversation today that those of you listening in will have an opportunity to catch a glimpse of that passion and to have a little bit of understanding of the spirit that continues to give life and hope to our friend Paulette. So Paulette, welcome, and thanks for joining in this conversation with me today.
Thank you, Amanda, thank you.
We're having this conversation across distance. I'm in Regina, Saskatchewan, and Paulette is in Toronto, Ontario. And where I live in Saskatchewan, we are well into the province's reopening plan. And churches are cautiously making plans. We're even beginning to have some in-person gatherings again. Where you live and serve, how are things going with the pandemic in your congregation, in your family, in your community? How are things going for you?
Well, we are not where you are. We're just beginning the staged reopening of businesses, work, activities, and also churches. I am, in addition to being the minister at St. Andrews, I'm also the interim moderator for Mimico Presbyterian Church. Okay. So these 2 congregations are beginning to figure out what it means and how we're going to do it, but we're trusting God and we're easing into it. It's a lot of work, but we're looking forward to that day when we'll see each other face to face in different circumstances, and just continue the church that we've been doing under the pandemic. Yeah, it's hard, Amanda, as you know. I don't know if Saskatchewan had the same kinds of fatalities under the pandemic as Ontario does.
We just had a handful, not too many here in Saskatchewan.
We have a big dose of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sure. And I don't know if you've heard about the report from the military people that they brought into our seniors' residences. And that is not just a damning report, but it's been a report that is on the heart of churches, should be on the heart of churches in Ontario. It is certainly on the heart of churches as Mimico and St. Andrews.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
sure.
Those are very serious reports. And it connects with what I was going to ask you about as well, because there's a lot of things that we've been learning, things that have been coming to light because of the pandemic. And You commented in a recent sermon that the COVID-19 pandemic is revealing some things that were there before, but we didn't see them.
Yeah.
And you actually quoted from Bob Marley, and I think one day I'd like to quote from Bob Marley in a sermon.
Yeah.
When he was talking about the exposing of myths, that we thought we were living in heaven
But we,
when we were really living in hell.
yes,
And
yes.
so, what
Yeah.
is the pandemic revealing that the church should really be noticing and
Yeah.
responding to?
Yeah, I'll say a little bit about Bob Marley. It's how I interpret Bob Marley. It's not, I don't know what Bob Marley intended to mean by those words,
Sure.
but I think what Bob Marley did was to put on the table certain truths about our locations in which we live. And he kind of invokes a discerning spirit. I suggest him that we might be living in these locations and we're not discerning enough. We live our lives oblivious to the realities around us. And so we live a kind of false security lifestyle kind of thing with our distorted visions. But what I think that the pandemic has done, it has pulled back the curtains on a lot of these stuff that we never really pay a lot of attention to, like what's going on in our senior residences, how our workers compensated, how our governments supervising these places, how do the owners of these places respect, you know, the life and the humanity and all that stuff. I think that for us in Ontario, the pulling back of the curtains by COVID-19 has revealed a lot of those heart-rending experiences, the deaths and the running away from these residences by the staff. They were afraid to be there, and it's just one of the worst cases of neglect in our healthcare system that I've felt and experienced as a pastor and as a person living here. So I think Bob was right on. And I think when Bob said, I think for me it was a wake-up call. Are you living in hell and you think you're living in heaven? You know, what does that mean? So that's the kind of thing that really motivated me and my Christian appetite for being prophetic. Yeah, so so I chanted Bob Marley for the whole time. You know, it gave me the kind of energy I needed to do my work.
Mm-hmm. Are there other things that you're seeing in this time that the church should be paying attention to right now?
Oh, definitely. And I go back to, you mentioned the sermon that I preached on Pentecost Sunday. Amanda, the church needs to pay attention to anti-Black racism, period. There's no nice way of saying it. I think that the times demand that. And so that's my big push on that. The church needs to pay attention to anti-Black racism. Mm-hmm. You talked about that sermon. I need to tell you that sermon was hammered out in pain. It was hammered out in agony, and it was hammered out in a sense of loneliness in terms of being a part of a church with colleagues and all of that are into, not just into Christian stuff, but are into the talk and the work for justice. It was a very lonely time. I found that I took up the phone, and it was my decision to try to call the Black ministers that I know. And so that was my decision. It has nothing to do with whether or not if I had called a white minister, if they wouldn't have responded. That's where I went. So I did my calls and sort of felt good. You were not alone in this pain. Mm-hmm. I must tell you that going into 2020 Pentecost, I just could not feel that party spirit. Mm-hmm. I couldn't feel the birthday of the church. I just could not, I couldn't fathom churches preaching on the birthday and the balloons and all of that. I couldn't fathom that.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, all of those things went through the window. I look at the global pandemic and the global response to anti-Black racism. And no matter what we did, we couldn't get rid of it off our TVs. Every time you change the station, you go on another station, it's there. So for me, then there goes to do a worship service, and that's Paulette speaking, on this Pentecost, in view of all the stuff that has been happening in our world and with regards to the pandemic and anti-Black racism, to really do a service about the birthday of the church and partying. I think it's a blatant display of cruelty as siblings. And that gets me into the Mama God part of it. I remember the story of God saying to Cain, where's your brother? You know, where is your brother, kind of thing. And I don't know, Cain trying to get around it, but where is your brother? So I thought that
you really moved away from let's celebrate that the church began then, which tends to be a direction that and you moved into this image of the Spirit of God as Mama God. Yes. Which was quite. I wonder if you tell. I found that quite fascinating.
Okay, yeah, I think Amanda. Well, it's how I approach scriptures. I don't know if you know, but biblical stuff is my heart, is my passion.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm writing a thesis on this thing, and it's taking forever, but it's my passion.
Are you? Oh wow. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I'm doing one. But the thing was that I could not hold on to the excitement about Peter's vision and all of that stuff. I couldn't. What I started thinking about the Pentecost, and what came to my mind in my time of pain was, here you are, we are celebrating the gift, because Jesus did say, I will go, I will send the Comforter, I will send you the Advocate. And here was the story of the Advocate. So for me, let me see what this Advocate brings that could be helpful for me as I try to figure out living in this time, you know? So I could not, I saw the Advocate as a dimension of God. I'm not changing the whole Trinity thing, but what I'm saying, for the Advocate, this third person of the Trinity became for me a Mama God. And it came out of my reflection and my pain in watching the death of George Floyd. I watched all those white police officers on his back. I watched the white police officer with his knee in the man's neck. I heard his cries that he could not breathe. And what really got to me at the end of it all was his cry for his mother, and his mother was dead. As I reflected on that, I said to myself, could it be that he was not calling for his dead mother, but he was calling for a Mama God? And could not the Pentecost be about the gift to the world of the other person of the Trinity in the form of a Mama God? So that's where I went. I also, this kind of conversation came out of my understanding of how, you know, in my culture, and I mean other cultures too, to call out for your mother when you're a big grown man or woman, that's not an easy cry. Eh? That's a cry you need to pay attention to. And I also thought about how different could a Mama God be for the church? And I was speaking specifically with regards to the issue of racial justice and anti-Black racism. How could a Mama God be more useful to the church? So I thought about, what could this Mama God do? What could she do to her siblings, those who are so unaware that they could go on preaching and teaching forever and ever and not paying attention to what's happening to their other siblings. How could a mama God do something? Would the mama God say, where's your brother or where's your sister? Or could a mama God say, come, my children, come and sit on my lap and let me teach you some wisdom. Let me teach you how to love. Let me teach you how to care. And let me teach you about the differential power that is among you as my siblings and how you live. So that's where I was going with the sense of the mama God asking for those different things. And I think I based it also on my sense of the Black story, especially I'm from the Caribbean, so I talk more about the Caribbean state of enslavement. Because these Black mothers, they nursed children that they did not bear from their wombs. They nursed white children on their breast. Right. And they were demanded to do it, right? So they had to do it. Now, I don't know whether or not at the end of the day, a baby on the breast changed the whole thing. But the point was that we can nurture on our breasts those that we did not give birth to through our wombs. So that was my thing. I'm saying a mama God that knows that, this mama God knows that already, that mama God could speak to us in a different way to say that we need to pay attention to those other siblings. And so that's basically it. And in this time of crisis, I mean, I just imagined the mama God flipping out her breast, and just say suck, you know, and just say suck. I imagine it with George Floyd, because I needed to leave Floyd in order to get into doing the worship on the Sunday. So I imagined the mother God just saying, come, feed on my breast.
There's something about that image that brings together both the comfort of a mother and that nurturing and that comfort in the midst of the pain and agony that many people are experiencing in these days. But at the same time, it's not only comfort, it's also the challenge. It's the strong, fierce mama that corrects her children and says, yeah, you've got to go to
do this
to your siblings. This is vital. This is life and death. And so it's that bringing together of a God who both loves us and nurtures us, but also like judges us and says, you've got to change. You know, you're
right, Amanda. And I'll take it a little bit further. And I'll do Jamaican. It's hard to speak the Jamaican so that it makes sense. But I'll do the Jamaican style that I was thinking. I was not saying, oh, come over here. It's just say, how do you say it in Jamaican that it makes sense? I say, come over, yasso. Come, yasso, me want to write, yasso. Come sit down upon my lap. And don't tell me no foolishness say you can't come. Come sit down upon my lap. And you know, so you either come or you are in big trouble. So that's that mama God I was saying that. And you touched on it when you say that your child said, come over here, sir. Sit down here, sir. Me want you here, sir, right now.
Right.
No conversation, sit down here, sir. Right? So that's the kind of mama God I was thinking of, that as you put it so well, the nurturing, the comforting. But when you call it to say, listen, how you treat your brother, how you treat your sister, sit down, let me talk to you. Yeah. It was the energy that if I had a Jamaican church, it would go. But I think that the Spirit of God really led, and people were able to hear what I had to say. Yeah, I think a Mama God vision would be good for us, eh? Yeah. I really think a Mama God vision would be good for us.
Even when we don't come from that culture, I think there's a lot within many of our cultures that image of the mother, the fierce, nurturing, but also getting us in line.
Yes. You know, she steps in, rolling her eyes and switching herself and say, you come here. You know, there's no, you got it. You got it. You got it.
In the reflection, the pandemic has really really brought out a lot of issues, as you've said, and brought to light a lot of things that we need to be paying attention to and
Yeah.
responding to and acting on. And anti-Black racism, particularly because of some particular incidents, but I think also just because the pandemic itself has raised a lot of the inequalities and the devastating impact on certain communities, including Black people in many places, as well as including Indigenous people in Canada and others, where the pandemic has had disproportionate effects on those communities, has really brought to light those things. And I was reading something written by my friend Adele Halliday, and she had written that to people like me, to white European background folks in the church, that we can do more than just pray about those situations. And she said that we must pray and preach and protest. And I love that they've all left P's to help us remember, pray and preach and protest, in solidarity with our siblings who are being hurt and killed. And so I want to ask you, Paulette, also P, what message would you give to the Presbyterian Church in Canada today about what we must do in response to what is being revealed to us?
Amanda, I've thought long and hard about what message I think I need to do, and I'm wrestling with it because I've seen so many messages written and said, and we don't really get anywhere with it. But going back to what Adele said, I think that Adele is right on as she speaks about prayer and preaching and protest. And what I would add to that, and I'm sure Adele would have said something along the same line, is that the preaching that we're talking about is prophetic preaching. So I think we need to understand prophetic preaching. And we don't have to be afraid of prophetic preaching, because you might preach until Jesus comes, and if it's not prophetic, it's not really doing what it's supposed to do. And we might need another time to talk about prophetic, but it's that sense of that urgency that the prophets walked with when they talked about righteousness and justice as being a part of your everyday lives. And when it's not happening, then it's a crisis. So it's just that kind of preaching. I also think that, and I think Adele has dealt nicely with what she thinks that white siblings need to do. And I just wanted to add that for us as Blacks that are scattered all over the church in terms of leadership, I think we also have that sense, how are we going to live within a white structure that is predominantly white in terms of our white faith? And how are we going to not surrender ourselves to internalizing our stuff, where we're afraid to talk about what racism is. We're afraid to talk about our history of suffering because we don't want to hurt people. So I think there is a twin responsibility on the part of those of us who bear bodies like this, that are visible signs of anti-Black racism, to really get out of that space to be able to be what God really wants to be. Because I think that we and I'm talking about Black people, and the same can be said about any group that has this kind of history, that there is a responsibility that God has placed in our hands. And it's on account of our suffering and our experience of anti-Black racism to be that light. It doesn't mean that you can shine by yourself when nobody else is doing it, but I think that role, I wouldn't want to miss out on that part of it. So how do we allow or encourage or enable this kind of sharing or this kind of work among Black people themselves, so that they can be a part of this work? So that's, and I think prayer, I mean, what we do best is to pray, right? That's what we do best. And I have to believe that when we get on our knees or wherever, equivalents of our knees, that the person who really helps to make that thing happen is the Holy Spirit. So I think that prayer is just the number one. We need to do that. But make that preaching prophetic.
Yeah. And it's not that sense of prophetic, like some people think that prophetic means I know what the future is, but
No,
prophetic, like I
yes,
name what I
yes,
see
yes,
happening, and I
yes, yes,
challenge
yes, yes,
myself and others around me to
exactly.
be transformed. Yeah.
And I do think that that approach to racism and to Black racism, I think that's a good approach because it doesn't leave all the work on one side. And I think it's a work that best meets the standard of the love that Christ has called us to do, to practice and live. The love that enables all of us to do the work that we need to do. Black folks need to do that work,
Mm-hmm.
and white folks need to do your work. So in a nutshell, in this short time, this is all I have to say about that. But I had something that I wanted, what I think that white people, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that for a lot of white people, it is hard to step in the shoes of, of somebody else if you don't, if that person's experiences are so different from yours, it is really hard. So my thing that I would say to, like if I'm speaking to you now, and I'm saying, Amanda, and this is not judgmental, I don't know what you preach. I say, Amanda, what are you going to preach? This is pre-Pentecost.
Yeah.
Amanda, what are you going to preach on Pentecost?
Uh-huh.
And you know, and just sort of tease you out. And I would say, okay, Amanda, your grandmother, your grandfather, your auntie got sick with the COVID. They were shipped off to these places, no contact, they died, no last words, no gathering, no anything. And then I said, Amanda, then your friends and other family members, they're in long-term facilities. Oh, listen to the horrible news and all of that stuff. The neglect, the suffering, the death, the staff running away. I say, Amanda, the death toll is rising. I know I'm talking to you before Pentecost, the
Yes.
Sunday, right?
Yeah.
And I'm saying, and Amanda, on the streets, on the TV, you see images of some Black police officers on the back of a white man. And the white man is begging for his life to no avail. And one of the officers' knees was on his neck, Amanda. But I said, Amanda, you know a little bit more because you know that in your psyche, you're holding, in your psyche, in your heart, the memories of the brutality and violence on the bodies of whites.
Mm-hmm.
So you know that. So the scene in the US is not that different. You can relate to it. And so I would say, Amanda, after all of this stuff, what do you preach on the day of Pentecost?
Mm-hmm.
Amanda, are you going to have a birthday party?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I would ask you. And I say, do you preach about the day when the church was born and those inside and outside, they received the Spirit? Or Amanda, do you have a responsibility to read the context in which you're living, your own experiences?
Mm-hmm.
And then I would ask her, Amanda, do you think that the Spirit of God is only interested in the people that were in the upper room and on the streets in Jerusalem? Or could it be that the Spirit of God was interested in your stuff?
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I think white people need to walk in that place. See yourself, just shift the images around for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
How could you preach on Pentecost Sunday? Out of what do you preach? So, so I think that is part of prophetic speaking. It's not meant to harm. It's
Mm-hmm.
just meant to call attention to our neglect as white Christians and our failure to grasp the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But because of grace, we can learn and we can do what we need to do in love. Yeah, I think we can.
Thank you so much, Paulette, for this conversation and just taking from that in terms of our call to preach and to pay attention to what is happening around us and to our siblings. And thank you for the invitation to have those conversations with each other as preachers, as listeners to sermons, to have those conversations with each other, to challenge each other, to have an experience of, to share in each other's experience and to respond to that in terms of how we preach God's word. So I thank you, and I pray for your continuing ministry at Humber Heights and in the community in which you live.
Yeah.
And I'll look forward to some more conversations down the line.
Yes, and I pray for you as you take on this additional year for such a time as this. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
And you also.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.